Welcome back to the deep dive. Ever get that feeling? Like your brain is just spinning its wheels, that blah feeling makes you want to stare out the window or just scroll through your phone forever. We're diving into that today. Boredom. And trust me, it's way more interesting than it sounds.
Oh, it really is.
We're going beyond the surface today, yeah, digging into the psychology and the societal impact of boredom, especially how it plays out in Africa.
Yeah.
We'll be using this research article from Frontiers in Sociology as our guide today, and it really unpacks some surprising stuff.
It really does. Boredom, it's one of those things that's often brushed aside as just a lack of something better to do, right?
Right.
But it's actually linked to like way deeper stuff,
Right.
impacting our mental state, even our physical health.
Okay, so let's jump right in. When we talk about boredom, what exactly are we even talking about? I mean, it's not just like being sleepy or tired.
Right, right. And the article defines boredom as this state of feeling uninterested, unstimulated, and unchallenged. But it goes beyond just feeling, uh, you know,
So it's like your brain is saying, give me something to work with here.
exactly. And when it doesn't get that stimulation, it can lead to some pretty unexpected consequences, both good and bad.
Okay, this is where I think it gets really interesting. The article highlights how boredom can actually be a catalyst for creativity and innovation.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that work?
Well, think about it this way. When we're bored, our minds naturally start to wander, right?
Right.
We daydream, we brainstorm, we start making connections we might not have made otherwise.
Like our brains are going on a little adventure to try to find something interesting.
Precisely. It's like boredom kind of forces our minds to think outside the box and come up with new ideas and solutions.
So that feeling of being stuck in a rut
Mm-hmm.
can actually push us OUT at that rut.
That's kind of cool. The article specifically dives into how this plays out in African cultures.
Yeah.
And I found that super fascinating.
Yeah, it's a really important perspective. And the article points out that in many traditional African cultures, boredom might not be experienced in the same way as in, say, more individualistic societies.
Because there's such a strong emphasis on community,
Yes.
social connection,
Yes.
and shared experiences. Exactly. Think about the role of storytelling, music, dance, and ceremonies in many African cultures. These activities are incredibly engaging, both mentally and socially, and they provide a constant source of stimulation.
So it's not just about entertaining yourself. It's about connecting with others, sharing stories, and experiencing life as a community.
Absolutely. And while modernization has definitely brought changes, many African communities still maintain these really rich social traditions, and they offer a buffer against boredom.
It makes you realize how much our environment and cultural background really shape our experience of even like basic emotions like boredom.
Yeah.
It's not just some internal state. It's connected to the world around us.
I completely agree. But of course, even with these strong traditions, the article acknowledges that modernization, coupled with the challenges of poverty and inequality, can create a breeding ground for boredom in many African societies.
It makes sense. When people lack access to opportunities, whether it's education, employment, or even just the resources to engage in, like fulfilling activities, it's easier to fall into that boredom trap.
And that's where those negative consequences of boredom, the ones we often overlook, can really take hold.
This is where I start to think, okay, boredom isn't always about sparking creativity. The article talks about a darker side to this emotion, too.
Right, because while boredom can be a catalyst for good, chronic boredom, the kind that lingers and becomes a constant companion can be seriously detrimental.
And we're not just talking about feeling a little blah. We're talking about a potential link to, wow, that's really saying something about the impact of the pandemic. I mean, anxiety is a serious issue. So for boredom to be even more prevalent during that time, it's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really highlights how much those lockdowns, the social isolation, the disruption of routines, it really messed with us on like a fundamental level.
It makes you realize that boredom isn't just about having nothing to do. It's about, like, feeling disconnected, unchallenged, and that uncertainty about the future.
Yeah.
And then you layer a global pandemic on top of that. It's no wonder boredom became such a widespread issue.
Right, and it's important to remember that even within the African context, the experience of boredom during the pandemic wasn't uniform.
Right.
The research highlights how factors like socioeconomic status, access to technology, and living conditions all play a role in how people experienced and coped with boredom.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The article mentioned that access to technology in particular seemed to be like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. On one hand, having access to things like the internet and social media, it provided a vital lifeline for many people during the lockdowns. It allowed them to connect with loved ones, access information, even find entertainment and distractions.
So in that sense, technology might have actually mitigated some of the negative impacts of boredom.
To some extent, yes, but the research also found that excessive use of social media was linked to, like, increased feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and even boredom itself.
Like a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah.
You're bored, so you're scrolling endlessly through social media, which makes you feel even more disconnected and ultimately more bored.
Precisely. And this is where I think the article makes a really important point about the need to find healthy and sustainable ways to manage boredom, especially in the face of, increasing modernization and these technological advancements.
It brings us back to that idea that boredom is like a signal. It's a call to action.
Yeah,
But we need to be mindful of how we respond to that call.
exactly. It's about recognizing those moments of boredom and using them as opportunities for growth, for connection, self-discovery, rather than just trying to numb them with distractions.
Okay, so how do we actually DO that? What are some practical takeaways from all this? I mean, we've established that boredom is complex, it's impacted by our environment and our culture, and it's not going away anytime soon, so how do we make peace with boredom? And maybe even harness its power for good?
Well, I think the first step is simply acknowledging that boredom is a normal human emotion.
Yeah.
It's not a sign of weakness or failure. We all experience it from time to time.
It's like that saying, boredom is just a lack of imagination.
Exactly. Instead of viewing boredom as something negative to be avoided at all costs, try to approach it with a sense of curiosity. Ask yourself, what is this boredom trying to tell me?
Okay.
What need is going unmet in this moment?
I like that. It's like reframing boredom as an opportunity for like self-reflection rather than self-criticism.
Precisely. Once you've kind of identified the potential source of your boredom, you can start exploring ways to address it in a healthy and productive way. And it doesn't have to be complicated, right?
Yeah.
It could be as simple as, taking a break from screens, going for a walk in nature, picking up a new hobby, or reconnecting with loved ones.
So it's about finding those things that spark your interest, that challenge you, that make you feel more alive, more connected.
Absolutely. And it might take some experimentation. Not every activity will resonate with everyone, but the key is to keep exploring and to be open to trying new things.
So what you're saying is, instead of dreading boredom, we should embrace it as like a catalyst for growth and self-discovery.
Yes.
It's about becoming, what did we call them earlier, boredom warriors.
Exactly. Embrace the boredom, listen to its whispers, and use it as fuel for, a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
This has been incredibly insightful. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on. The article briefly mentioned the idea of, get this, positive boredom, which sounds like an oxymoron.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
It's a fascinating concept. Positive boredom refers to those moments of boredom that, while maybe not inherently enjoyable, can actually be beneficial for our well-being.
Okay.
Think about activities like meditation, spending time in nature, or even just daydreaming.
So activities that might seem, uneventful or even a little boring on the surface, but that actually allow our minds to wander and recharge.
Exactly. These moments of positive boredom can help us to tap into our creativity, reduce stress, and gain new perspectives.
It's like giving our brains permission to just unplug from like the constant stimulation of modern life
Yeah.
and just wander freely for a while.
Yeah.
I could see how that could be incredibly valuable.
It's about finding that sweet spot between stimulation and stillness. We need both to thrive.
This is definitely giving me a lot to think about. I'm already starting to see those moments of boredom in a new light.
That's fantastic. It's all about shifting our perspective
Yeah.
and recognizing the hidden potential in those seemingly empty moments.
This whole conversation, it reminds me of something I read recently about how some of the most creative minds in history, people like Einstein and Picasso, they actually swore by the power of boredom.
Yeah.
Like they would intentionally carve out time for unstructured thinking and daydreaming, believing that those moments of, just quiet contemplation were essential for their creative process.
That's so interesting. It speaks to the idea that we don't always need to be, like, constantly stimulated and productive. Sometimes the most brilliant ideas emerge when we allow our minds to wander, to, make those unexpected connections.
It's like we need a little bit of chaos in our lives to spark true creativity.
I love that analogy. And it's not just about creativity either. Those moments of quiet contemplation can also be incredibly restorative for our mental and emotional well-being.
It's about giving ourselves permission to just be present in the moment,
Yeah,
without judgment, without expectation.
precisely. And that can be a radical act of self-care in today's world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into like this surprisingly complex world of boredom, what's the key takeaway here? What do you hope our listener walks away with today?
I think the biggest takeaway is that boredom is not the enemy. It's not something to be feared or avoided. Instead, it's an opportunity. It's a chance to listen to our inner selves, to tap into our creativity, and to connect with the world around us in a more meaningful way.
It's about embracing those blah moments and seeing them as fertile ground for, growth and discovery.
Exactly. It's about becoming boredom alchemists,
Ooh,
transforming those seemingly empty moments into something valuable and enriching.
I love that, boredom alchemist. It's about turning boredom into gold.
Precisely. And the beauty of it is that we all have that power within us.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening conversation. I know I'm going to be looking at those moments of boredom in a whole new light from now on.
Me too. It's amazing how a little shifting perspective can completely change our understanding of something.
To our listener out there, we encourage you to keep exploring the topic of boredom. We've just scratched the surface here today. Check out that fascinating research article from Frontiers in Sociology that we referenced, and keep diving deeper into those moments of quiet contemplation. You never know what hidden gems you might uncover. Until next time, stay curious.